This is the
Five Starr
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. Hi. What do you guys want to talk about? Thanks, guys. Back to you.
I legitimately can't get out of this slump. I drove for 5 hours from PA to Michigan, got to my hotel, slept for about 45 minutes. Dude, it seems like I haven't slept in 8 weeks. You know, I've heard through the grapevine that naps are not the best things to do because all they do is make you more tired. You know, when I was 18, that didn't seem to be true. But now that I'm 30 plus, yeah, I think those people are right. Naps are no good. So, well, I'm still here in Detroit. Got my microphone hooked up here. I've not had a chance to dabble in the audio settings. It is very acoustic from where I'm filming. But I just got done watching NXT Takeover, so I figured why not? Got a couple hours to kill before I have to head out and meet with people, so why not do a quick recording session? And by quick, I mean rapid fire Cliff's Notes. We got to get this done in under 20 minutes. There's no time. No, I'm just kidding. We're not going to do that. I do want to try and get this done rather promptly, though, because I still have to edit this thing and piece it all together before I travel back to Pittsburgh tomorrow. You know, at least if I can get the audio recording part done, that'll be 50% of the work off my plate. And Lord knows I love to drone on. So we're going to do Retro NXT and Retro Raw here. As always, make sure you subscribe and comment if you have not done so already. Thank you to everybody who comes back to check out the Five Starr Wrestling Report every week. Mondays and Fridays here on YouTube and Rumble. It's the wrestling podcast nobody knows but everybody needs. Someday I'm going to edit that on my YouTube page and put that slogan up there. Like I said, though, I need to try to get through the recording here, so let's dive into Retro Raw. And then we'll talk about the NXT Takeover special last. All right, so the preemption phase of Monday Night Raw is over. And now we have reached the season premiere. Pains me to even utter the words wrestling and season in the same sentence. Yet here we are. That's Vince's vision of sports entertainment right there. And of course, with that comes a whole new breed of production alterations. They got the brand new opening graphic, the vignette, the new theme song attached. They still had Vince doing the theatrical dubbed over commentary for the cold open. And I do mean theatrical in the literal sense. That man is quite the wordsmith. Now, it's been a few weeks since the SummerSlam report, so it's probably a good idea to revisit a handful of the talking points here. On the go-home edition of Raw right before the pay-per-view, we saw Davey Boy turn heel in a line with Jim Cornette and the rest of the cavalry. Since that point, he's gone a complete makeover. And by that, I mean he's got a crew cut. The Allied powers are no more. By that same token, we've been covering the whole Lex Luger situation. Him jumping ship to Nitro without notice and basically appearing on an episode of Raw when he had technically already left for WCW. God, the whole thing was a complete disaster. It is one of those surreal moments, though, where you see something like that and, you have a boatload of questions. Obviously, this is all pre-internet, so people are talking. And likewise, you got the fallout with everything that happened with Shawn and Razor, their iconic ladder match that everybody still raves about to this day. And it was a spectacular match, don't get me wrong. Still holds up all these years later. And I don't know what it was. Call it what you want. A Raw detox of sorts. Me not having to watch the show for a couple weeks. Got a little bit of a breather. I actually thought this was a really good show. And you all know my opinions on the majority of these Raws in 1995. Most of them sucked ass. And blew. But this might have been the rare gem in the pile of dog shit where I looked back and thought, that was a very fine episode of Monday Night Raw I just watched. I know the trend's not going to continue, so we'll relish in the compliment while we can. But they really went all out on this one. The follow-up to all the pay-per-view material I thought was pretty good. The quality of what we saw in terms of the in-ring product versus the Angle story advancement, I thought was relatively good. It's almost like they were actually trying to make the season premiere come off like a big deal. I still could barely get that line out without puking. Season premiere. Fuck off with that shit. So anyway, the opener is Razor versus Davey Boy. Even though the setup to this match was them showing the angle from the pay-per-view where Razor confronted Dean Douglas in the back and then popped him in the mouth. That apparently was done to set up Razor's match here with Davey Boy. So if you already couldn't tell what was coming, you're a numbskull. If you watch the entire match on mute and ignore McMahon and Lawler talking about pooper scoopers the whole goddamn time, you can enjoy the match a million times more. It's not a 5-star classic or anything like that, but Christ. By Raw standards in 95, this probably would have ranked among the top 10 matches of the year. And it is technically Bulldog's first match on television as a heel. So that was kind of a unique caveat to the overall story. He got to work over Razor until they did the big ref bump deal on the floor. And that set up the angle where Scott gives Bulldog the Razor's Edge for the visual pin. I did love watching as you can see Razor struggling to actually hoist Bulldog over his shoulder. So as he's straining to get him up, you hear Vince go, "Can he get him up? Yes, he can. No, he can't. Yes, he can." There's like no pause. Just one emotion to the next. Excitement followed by bitter disappointment, followed by excitement yet again. And of course, that whole escapade was the cue for Dean Douglas to hit the ring and give Razor the double axe to the back of the head. It also led to the Geek of the Week moment for the 1-2-3 Kid. I know that bit is trademarked, but Jesus Christ. That's Sean Waldman. So he tries to run out to thwart Dean's interference, and the Kid gets immediately cut off and draped over the top rope like an absolute job guy. Of course, this was before we saw the angle afterwards with him and Razor. Like, when I first saw Douglas lay out Waldman here, I'm like, how is this guy still a babyface? He has to be turning heel soon, right? How could anybody cheer him after this? He looked like such a dork. So when we come back and Vince is standing in the ring trying to interview him and Razor. Now I say trying because Lawler wouldn't shut the fuck up on commentary. God damn, he was annoying. He literally talked over Vince the entire time. As Vince is trying to conduct this interview and get the comments from the boys, God, Lawler just sitting there making snide jabs and just being a complete mark for himself. I mean, I like Jerry Lawler. I've never had anything against him. But holy fuck was that guy irritating as a WWF commentator. Is it any wonder younger fans like myself have such a problem with him on the commentary booth? He would not shut the fuck up. Jerry, it's real simple. When a promo is happening in the ring, when you see people holding a live mic, don't speak. Shut up. Why is that so hard? So in my attempts to drown out Lawler being a douchebag the whole time, the basic gist is that Razor got disqualified because the kid broke up Bulldog's pin attempt after Douglas had interfered on his behalf. So now the kid's trying to plead his case that, oh, he didn't cost Razor anything. And in fact, it was Razor that cost the 1-2-3 kid his match the other week. Apparently they never bothered to think, maybe we ought to show the film of that so people know what the hell we're referencing. Because I had no idea what the fuck Waldman was talking about here. But he's getting spiteful with Razor. And he eventually tells him that he's tired of being treated like a punk kid. He's tired of the disrespect. And if he has to beat Razor again on TV next week to earn that respect, then so be it. Which is a valid point. The 1-2-3 kid became famous here in the WWF by getting an upset win over Razor back in '93. That was when Razor was still a heel. But that was good to draw attention to that because it's easy to forget. So after the kid pouts off, Razor takes the floor and says that if the people want the match, if Vince wants the match, then we got it. On top of all the other crap Razor's dealing with right now, if he has to beat some sense into his best friend, then it's got to be that way sometimes. So again, going back to our conversation about them pushing forward angles and stories, they covered a decent bit of ground here. They planted the seeds for the Waldman heel turn. They put Davey Boy out there in his first televised match as a heel since the swerve a couple weeks ago. They still got Dean Douglas attached to the plot. A lot of needles are moving forward here. Then following that, we had the Smoking Guns getting a squash win over the Brooklyn Brawler, and a name that I wrote down is Bradford. I'm not entirely sure if that was me mishearing what Vince said. I can only hope to God his actual name was Brad Bradford, because that is an epic job guy name. Beyond that, I wrote absolutely nothing down. Billy and Bart did a bunch of sloppy-looking double-team stuff and then one with their backbreaker leg drop combo. Then we had another Goldust inset promo, which was magically wonderful and creepy at the same time, which was the goal. So, hey, it served its purpose. And yet again, I'm a goofball. I did not get a chance to record the audio snippet here. It's probably safe to say that trying to review Goldust promos would never be sufficient. I have no idea what he was talking about. I do know he referenced The Undertaker. So there's that. Then we had Isaac Yankem and Scott Taylor. It was the only time in recorded history where I've seen Glenn Jacobs do a chokeslam, and it wasn't the finish. I'm not kidding. He just randomly gives Taylor a chokeslam 30 seconds into the match. Then he just kept doing more moves. I think the problem was the chokeslam wasn't punny enough. Couldn't figure out something teeth-related when it came to nicknaming the chokeslam. So instead he went with the DDS, which was a DDT finish. Because apparently that was funnier. Or maybe he was better at doing the DDT and said, I think I'll just keep that as my finish for the time being until I master how to do a real chokeslam. Which is probably a good idea, because that chokeslam looked like shit. Oh, and I should briefly mention here before I talk about the main event. In Your House 3, September 24th. Got it marked on the calendar here because you know I'm going to forget. We did get an early card preview from Todd here, and yeah, that show looks plainly skippable. In any case, the main event. It is a match approximately 6 months in the making as we speak. After Sid had turned on Shawn as his bodyguard following WrestleMania, Shawn has been anxiously stewing, waiting for this opportunity to get back at Sid and get his revenge. And so we get Shawn and Sid for the IC title, because you had to know Sid wasn't going to get in the ring with Shawn unless he had something to gain out of it. Man. Fuck, now I have to talk about this too. I mean, I literally just sat here a few weeks ago talking about Kevin Sullivan's passing. How we're right in the thick of recapping his hottest run in Crockett Promotions at the moment. Now I gotta sit here and talk about the unfortunate passing of Sid Vicious. A little late to the party here because it's been well over a week. But man, when I read that report, God, that was so heartbreaking. I had no idea he was battling cancer for some time. You know, I knew his health had been on a steady decline over the years. But that was such a tragic thing to read. Again, dude, another legend of the business. Another major star and name that we no longer have with us. And of course, when you're talking about a guy like Sid, you know, everybody's going to have their mixed bag opinions of him. Trust me, I know the guy wasn't a perfect soldier. He was probably difficult to work with at times. Probably a pain in the ass for most management. You know, the softball story jokes kind of write themselves. But the thing with a guy like Sid, you know, we often talk about those unique types of wrestlers that have those certain qualities unlike anybody else in the business. You know, I often think of a guy like a Randy Savage or a Ric Flair or even a Jimmy Valiant. You know, those crazy off-the-wall personalities that you can't help but be entertained by. Sid was always one of those guys to me. No matter where he was, be it WCW in the late 80s, early 90s, later on when he came back in 99, I think it was, kind of ended his career there full time. obviously the on and off WWF runs over the years, Sid always made an impact. Anything he ever did, be it as a face or a heel, I was never disappointed or turned off by any of his work. Was he the greatest wrestler in the world? Oh, fuck no. Which is kind of what made him such a remarkable talent. You know, I kind of compared to the train wreck element of watching pro wrestling in a vacuum. Whenever Sid was involved with something on camera, you knew it was going to be goddamn entertaining. And like, you even watched Sid in this match with Shawn. The guy had a natural presence on camera that you really can't explain. It's that kind of charisma that you're not able to teach. Sid had the look. He had the facials, the ability to sell, the way he registered everything. You know, even as a standard big bully where he's booked to overpower and dominate Shawn for a lot of the action, there's still an intensity to everything he does. The guy looked legitimately unhinged. And that's before you ever heard the promo work. God, Sid promos were a whole other can of worms. And again, you know, if you want to say his matches were hokey and campy, that's your prerogative. I disagree, but I mean, hey, there's still people out there that think Kenny Omega's the best goddamn wrestler in the world. So what the fuck do I know? Weed's illegal in California too. Doesn't mean it's ethically good. But, you know, it gives Shawn the chance to be the scrappy underdog here, make his valiant comeback. He ends up giving Sid a pair of sweet chin musics to get the clean pin. And it's another notch in HBK's belt, capping off that year-long rivalry that kind of went under the radar following Mania. And again, going back to what I said about Sid kind of being on and off throughout a lot of his career with both WCW and WWF, you know, he wasn't the most reliable guy when it came to longevity in a particular company. He was definitely a bouncer. You know, I think he's about to live shortly after Survivor Series this year, and I don't think he comes back until like August or September of next year. Now, that was when he came back and kind of refurbished his personality to be more unstable and crazy. Most of his promos were very hush-toned. Truly, though, it's hard to actually come up with the words to describe a guy like Sid. Psycho Sid, Sid Vicious, Sid Justice, whatever you want to call him. But you don't ever get the chance to replicate a gimmick like that in wrestling. Sid Udy was Sid Vicious. He was the gimmick. 24/7. For better or worse. I think it's amazing. I'll never apologize for being a huge Sid fan growing up. They still have those graphic tees out there that read, "You know and I know that you are half the man that I am, and I have half the brain that you do." Goddamn right I'd wear that shit out in public, dude. Loud and proud. All for Sid. Because he rules the world. And don't you forget it. Maybe that's why I was in such a good mood watching Raw this weekend. Because I knew I'd get the opportunity to talk about Sid's career and look back at his great memories. Of course, I can't sum all those up in 5 minutes. But man, what a talent. A true one of a kind. And you can't say that about a lot of people in this business. But Sid Vicious was unique. He was special. You know, overall, the show had its positives. And while I know that was probably a one and done until the next show we watch, I am perfectly satisfied with a good Raw. I still detest the whole season premiere garbage. Only in Vince's world would that shit ever get through a board meeting. So on that note, let's talk about NXT Takeover. After it took me approximately 5 fucking hours to find on Peacock. You know, it's astonishing. The minute I start complaining about WWE using seasons to document all their episodes, that's a primary reason it took me a day and a half to actually locate this Takeover special on the network. Just because of the fact that everything is bookmarked by season. Nothing says NXT Takeover Fatal 4-Way. No. In order to find it, I have to click the icon titled NXT Takeover Season 1, Episode 4. Right. Because obviously I'm the idiot that couldn't remember what season we were at with the NXT specials. Can't make this shit up, folks. You really can't. You know what I ought to start doing? I should probably just start titling all the takeovers by season when I upload them. How much more confusing can I possibly make it for people to find? So we're still kind of in this trial phase with NXT where they're trying to give the developmental guys more of a pay-per-view platform. Most of these things are still being taped from Full Sail. So it's not quite at the same level of the takeover specials we would see in the big venues once it really started to catch fire in about a year or so. But they are running about the length of a typical WWE Network pay-per-view, or Premium Live Special as they're now called. There were 6 matches in total on the card. I would say, kind of following the pattern of most of the network specials we reviewed thus far. They're relatively easy shows to watch. They're very structured. Kind of has a more modern card format where they try something really hot at the beginning. There's a couple underneath or lull segments in the middle there. Then they kind of pick things back up around the main event. Again, only 6 matches in total. So I didn't get burnt out midway through the show like I would with an AEW pay-per-view, where I'm just begging the fucking thing to be over after match 4. Then there's like 8 more matches to go on the card. Well, they kicked it off with the Ascension Lucha Brothers Tag Team title match. I keep calling them the Lucha Brothers. It's the Lucha Dragons. Entirely different team. Although, didn't I hear a rumor about the Lucha Brothers having potentially signed a contract with WWE? Or they were in negotiation with them about signing? Or is that just another one of those Dave Meltzer CNN reports? Well, in any case, we're talking about the Lucha Dragons here. And remember, Sin Cara and Kalisto won that giant tournament to earn the title shot. The Ascension have run roughshod over practically the entire division. I think I even remember saying when the Lucha Dragons won the finals round against the Vaudevilles, I was like, at this rate, they may as well just win the whole fucking series and walk out with the tag belts, considering how hard they're being pushed right now. So naturally, guess who won the tag belts? Now, before I immediately segue into the finish without talking about any of the in-between, if I had to summarize this in its simplest terms, it was about as indie as you could get without becoming full-fledged ridiculous or unbelievable. Now, first of all, you had the dynamic of the two teams that were already quasi baby faces because the crowd was 99% smart mark. So they didn't really want to boo either team here. They like the Ascension because they're Road Warrior-like powerhouses that beat up everybody. And they like the Lucha guys because they can do all the cool flips and the crazy-looking gymnastics. So they were eating both of these teams up. Like anytime the Ascension were on offense, they would all chant, "Yah." When the Lucha Dragons started rallying a comeback at the end, they all cheered and applauded the big dives and flips. I actually noted here, Kalisto's comeback was every sloppy lucha spot you'd see in a PWG match, but the people popped for every moment. I especially liked when he tried for a sunset flip over Victor and just flat out missed the powerbomb spot. So Victor had to basically take his own bump. And they did a bunch of floor dives. Basically broke down to where I don't even really think it mattered who the legal guy was because the ref didn't give a shit. And the big finish is the Ascension trying to set up Kalisto for the fall of man. But Sin Cara picks Connor's ankle and then kicks him out to the floor. And that way when Victor runs over and knocks him off the apron, Kalisto can hit Salida del Sol on Victor to get the pin. And you know, it's supposed to be one of those big shocking upset moments where you see the Ascension lose what I believe was their first major match as a tag team via pinfall. The announcers are selling the shock factor of it. I had no memory of it ever happening. God, the Ascension are such a fogged up memory at this point. I mean, I really didn't put a whole lot of stock into the finish here. The Lucha Dragons won, and I was like, cool. When do we get FTR versus Chad Gable and Jason Jordan? Kind of sucks to say, but like, I mean, how many people actually remember the Lucha Dragons beating the Ascension for the NXT tag titles in 2014? At the time, perhaps it was a big deal. But you think like 10 years after the fact, you know, there's been so many bigger, crazier moments that we've seen in NXT. Kind of makes this moment seem inferior by comparison, doesn't it? It's kind of the sad reality where the Ascension really haven't been relevant in the wrestling bubble in well over 8 years. The Lucha Dragons, kind of the same deal. You know, 10 years doesn't seem like a lot of time, but damn. In wrestling years, that may as well be an entire millennia. But we'll see how they move forward with Kalisto and Sin Cara as the NXT Tag Champs. I mean, immediately, I'm starting to think that they did this title switch, they could start transitioning the Ascension over into full-time main roster guys. It's kind of how my brain is wired when I see top NXT stars dropping clean pinfalls. Well, they must have gotten the call-up. We'll see if I'm right about that. So that led us to match number 2 on the TakeOver card. A pay-per-view / PLE level show, according to the powers that be. Yet they somehow thought putting CJ Parker on the card in a featured match would be an added boon to the overall event. They were wrong. I liked how they set this up by informing us that Parker demanded this match by complaining to William Regal that he wasn't on the TakeOver show. That he apparently confronted him on the pre-show. Because, yeah, of course, there would be an NXT TakeOver pre-show. Because who wouldn't want to see that? And I believe this also marks... Well, actually, no. It wouldn't be his debut, because we've already seen Baron Corbin work a handful of underneath matches already. This was just kind of where they started giving him a bigger push and used him as a regular on the program. God, CJ Parker versus Baron Corbin. And the Marks truly believe the black and gold era was the second coming of the Attitude Era. You can always depend on the internet dwellers to be accurate with data. Good Lord. It's the battle of the two most boring gimmicks of all time. Now, thankfully, they booked this exactly how it should have gone. CJ Parker sucks. Everybody's now acknowledged that, including the people formatting these segments. So now he's just getting sent out there to be job fodder for all the new names they're trying to get over. In this case, Baron Corbin. You know, now that I think about it, I think this is the only time in history where Baron was even remotely over as a babyface for a brief window. I think they were just happy to see him run through CJ Parker in 15 seconds. Gave him one stiff shot to the jaw, followed it up with the end of days, and pinned him flat. And the people all chanted, "Thank you, Baron." I mean, you can't really review a segment like this, other than chalking it up to what we knew it was. It was the booking committee collectively agreeing, we know that nobody likes CJ Parker, so rather than us dropping the gimmick entirely and trying to give him a total repackage, nah, fuck it, let's just humiliate the guy and make him a glorified geek. And the sad part is it's not getting him sympathy cheers. Because even the NXT fans realize how dead in the water his shtick is. So this is fine. No complaints from me here. It was exactly what it needed to be. Short and sweet. And then we eventually come to the hair versus hair showdown between Sylvester Lefort and Enzo Amore. The gimmick match that came together because Lefort shaved off like 1/4 of an inch of Enzo's beard like a month ago. So Enzo and Cass worked their magic to get Carmella to craft a special hair removal cream so they could dump it on the heel's head Buddy Roberts style and then leave him looking like a cue ball by the end of it. At least suspension of disbelief would have it seem that way. So after Enzo spent about 5 minutes running down the different haircut options he was about to give Lefort, they eventually got through all the pre-match shenanigans and started wrestling. And it was at that point where I realized, oh, okay. Yeah, so now I think I remember why they had Enzo talk more instead of actually wrestling. Or at least that's why he was in a tag team for the majority of his WWE career. Oh, by the way, before I mention anything else about the match, I had to comment on this real quick. During that previous match, they flashed up a graphic to let us know what was trending #1 on Twitter at the time. Take a wild guess. Baron Corbin. You know that was easily the highlight of his career. So anyway, back to this. This was contrastingly the worst hair versus hair match I think I've ever seen. A, because the match sucked. And B, they totally false advertised a stipulation in broad daylight and weren't even ashamed about it. I mean, think about it. The premise of a hair match is building up the anticipation of seeing who's going to get their head shaved, right? So, of course, by the end, the only thing we got was a bucket of white paint getting dumped on one of the heels. But no hair was actually clipped or shaved off. You could tell the people were pissed about that. As far as the wrestling goes, it looked equivalent to 2 deer on ice skates for about 50% of the match. I mean, Lefort was never a great worker to begin with, but he looked like fucking Bret Hart out there next to Enzo Amore. I mean, the only thing Enzo ever did remotely well was sell. Even here, he looked like a total spaz taking all the bumps. course, the finish is Enzo just rolling up Sylvester and pinning him flatter than a plate full of piss. There's a spot where Cass punched out Marcus Louis on the floor. And somehow that caused enough of a distraction for LaFour to get stacked up and pinned. So they spend like 2 to 3 minutes milking the drama of LaFour getting taken up to the barber chair. The fans actually had a few good chants here. We heard "to the chair," which is rather amusing. I believe we also heard "get the bucket." And that was prior to Cass and Enzo ripping off the Dudleys gimmick with Cass screaming, "Enzo, get the bucket." So what happens is they're trying to carry LaFour up the ramp, but Louis runs in from behind and clubs the heels. So everybody goes down in a heap. And while Louise and LaFour are trying to come up with a game plan, the babyfaces stir and kind of stalk them from behind. So LaFour just leaves Marcus high and dry and heads for the hills. So the babyfaces beat up Marcus Louis. They dump the bucket of white goop over his head. And that was it. That was part one of the alleged payoff. They dumped the gimmick hair removal cream over Luis's head. And it took until almost an hour later when they actually followed up on any of it. I mean, you could tell the crowd was pissed at the time. You know, they're methodically trying to pan around to show all the reactions from the fans. They had a couple enthusiastic people cheering, but there were a hand-select few people you could just see crossing their arms and looking very dejected. Like, fuck you, WWE. You promised us a hair versus hair match, and we all got duped. I'd have been pissed too if I were in attendance. You kidding? Now, just to reiterate, they do shoot an angle later on to follow up with all this. It was not what you would call a very satisfying payoff. Oh yeah, and did I mention the match was lousy? So yeah, this segment blew a cock. But now came the point in the show where we needed to break up the monotony a little bit. And, oh boy, this segment. I forgot all about this. Where do I even start trying to break all this down? So out comes GM William Regal. And at first I was kind of confused. I'm like, why is Regal coming out to make an announcement in the middle of this event? And as soon as the words "biggest international signing" crossed his lips, that is when I said, oh, now I remember. I know where this is going. Sure enough, they cue up the video package. It's Kenta. Oh, Kenta. What went wrong? Aside from everything. Yeah, this seems like ages ago at this point. Remember when WWE signed Kenta to a long-term major WWE contract? And they thought he was going to be their biggest international draw outside the mainstream American market? Remember when all the Japanese fanatics were creaming in their pants over the idea of Kenta signing with WWE? I can't even recall where he was prior. It wasn't New Japan, right? Might have been Pro Wrestling Noah. Because I know he was a draw in Japan. I just couldn't remember the last major promotion he worked for. I think it was Noah. And without completely throwing the baby out with the bathwater here, you've got to plausibly call Kenta's WWE run like it is. Complete, utter disaster. plagued by injuries, the way he was featured and presented in both NXT and main roster WWE. Did he even make it to the main roster? God, now I can't even remember. It's been so long. No, actually, wasn't he on that 205 Live program or whatever it was called? Remember when they tried to resurface the cruiserweights and they gave him their own show for a brief period? Wasn't Kenta like only on that show and nothing else? I mean, are you surprised? You knew Vince would never treat him like a main attraction. God, he was easily one of the worst signings I can recall in the modern era of wrestling. And look, I've been an avid watcher of Japanese wrestling throughout my life. I've seen plenty of the all-time greats. I've watched New Japan. I've watched All Japan. Little bit of PW Noah footage. I never got the hype of Kenta Kobayashi. I didn't get it. I didn't see it. He never stood out to me. I just never saw anything special in him. And like, I even remember back when all these rumors were circulating about him going to WWE, that they were interested in signing him. I just remember thinking to myself, really? Kenta? You know, and I know that's when they still had Shinsuke on their radar. And I was a much bigger proponent of him signing than Kenta. But I think Shinsuke still had like a year left on his New Japan contract before he could leave, so he was kind of roped in there. Yeah, I'm sorry. I never bought the hype of Kenta. Or Hideo Itami, as he went by under the old regime. Because everybody had to have their name changed. Vince had to put his stamp on any and all talent, regardless of whatever promotion they worked for previously, or if they were his own creation. And God, this segment. Oh, poor Kenta. I mean, they sent him out there to cut a goddamn promo in broken English. The people are immediately wetting him the moment he opens his mouth. They could barely understand him. Then he starts talking in Japanese, which did not do him any favors. Oh, this is horrible. And like the long and short of it, he announces that he's changing his name to Hideo Itami as a tribute to one of his heroes. Of course, at no point does he bother to actually explain who his hero was. And this part was weird too, because I'm pretty sure he meant Kenta Kobashi. But at the same time, he announces his childhood hero while he's also talking about changing his name to Hideo Itami. So that really didn't make a whole lot of sense. Then they flash up the Itami graphic on the Jumbotron, and everybody's kind of like, yay? Not really what we were expecting, but sure. Fine. So he gets some mild golf claps for that. And then out come the Ascension to crash the party. Because after all, when you're trying to establish a new hot signing from overseas, obviously you really want to get him over with the top talent immediately. So why not have him interact with the two guys who just got beat 45 minutes prior to two smaller lucha guys? Well, that makes perfect sense. So they confront Itami and immediately shit-can him, dump him out of the ring like a total job guy. And then when they get in Regal's face and immediately demand a title rematch, Itami just casually gets back in the ring and takes off his jacket. At which point he basically turns into the Karate Kid and starts beating up two bigger monsters like he's a fucking Power Ranger on steroids. God, it's the most ridiculous visual in the world. I mean, the guy's like 5'9", maybe 185 pounds soaking wet. He just blisters through the Ascension like they're cruiserweights. And, yeah, that was Kenta's WWE debut. Terrible promo, followed by a terrible name change, followed by a terrible hokey segment with a mid-card tag team. And see, that's the thing that blows me away. Like, even in his promo, he talked about how he wants to be NXT champion. That's why he's here. And you could probably tell from the beginning there was at least the germ of an idea that they would book him in the main event title picture. That maybe at some point he would get a run with the strap. Of course, that was prior to all the injuries and him not being able to stay healthy on a long-term basis. And who could blame management? Why would you put a strap on a guy that you know is not going to be able to stay healthy for long? The guy wasn't that old at the time. But he just could never get out of the gate. And then, like, just the way you debut him here, you throw him out there to interact with two guys in the tag division. It's not even like he confronted somebody like a Tyson Kidd or a Tyler Breeze. You know, two guys that were actually current main event heels. No, he did an angle with the Ascension, who literally just got pinned clean less than an hour prior. Why would anybody think this would help Kenta? Because he did some fake kicks and goofy-looking Japanese thrusts? I don't get it, dude. I mean, I still maintain everything I've ever said about Kenta's WWE run. It was a total flop. They knew they fucked up. It was a bad investment. And there have certainly been worse signings over the years. But this was definitely among the bad ones. And whether you want to blame Hunter for that, I mean, I don't even think it matters at this point. It was a collective blunder from all of the management. Vince, Triple H, Kevin Dunn, Bruce Pritchard. Anybody that even had the slightest input of bringing Kenta over to the WWE. They all played a part. Because they were all responsible. Somebody had to sign off on it. The buck stops with Vince. So you have to kind of rope him into that conversation too. Unfortunately. So that was a massive thumbs down. With that, massive thumbs up to Bull Dempsey squashing Mojo Rawley in T-minus 1 minute. It was the exact same booking formula with the Baron Corbin match. I was okay with it. And in fact, I'm pretty sure they're going to make that into some kind of storyline. I'm pretty sure Corbin and Dempsey feud at some point. But this is exactly what it needed to be. Bull and Mojo had a quick brawl to start. Mojo tried a couple football tackles and shoulder blocks in the corner. Bull fought back. Hit a big diving headbutt from the top rope for the 3. It was perfect. And I never proclaimed to be a Bull Dempsey fan. But he certainly had more likable qualities than Mojo Rawley ever did. I even approved of the bloody eye. Pretty sure that wasn't gimmick, though. I think Bull actually stiffed him. So then the show turned into sports entertainment again as they followed up on the hair stipulation. After blatantly false advertising a hair match where the losing participant didn't even get his head shaved, we see Enzo and Cass walking through the back acting all goofy. And they're still trying to hunt down Sylvester Lafart, which made it even dumber when they actually locate that he's talking with Marcus Louis down the hallway. Only this time, Louis has the white towel over his head to cover up his shaven head. But like, I saw this segment, I was like, Don't you think LaFleur would have been smart enough to just leave the building? Knowing that he got off scot-free to begin with? Knowing that Enzo and Cass were evidently still going to be looking for him? No. No, apparently he's a numbskull. He decided it would be wiser to continue playing this cat and mouse game at the Full Sail Arena. So anyway, they run off LaFleur again. He vanished. I don't think we ever saw him again for the rest of the show. But Louis is still standing there with a towel draped over his head. So Cass picks him up and carries him out to the ring so they can pull off the towel. And in addition to his head being shaved, his eyebrows and eyelashes are now gone. So he basically looked like a walking Halloween character. And of course, he oversells it to the point where it's just absurd. He's doing all these weird mannerisms, and it was so campy. So he runs off to the back, and then Enzo's go-home line is spelling out the description of what Marcus looks like now. B-A-W-L-D. Because, you know, the gimmick is they can't spell. So indeed, that was our payoff to the hair match. They shaved Marcus's head, eyebrows, and eyelashes. And I think most of the people scoffed at it because it wasn't Sylvester LaFleur, who actually had a full head of hair. Probably would have been more proper to see him bald by the end of the show. At least that would have been funny. But no, they swerved us and went with the lackey. So in the end, we did kind of get gypped, if you think about it. And from there, we come back for Bayley and Charlotte for the NXT Women's title. They finally ditched Bayley's god-awful generic NXT theme and debuted her actual good theme song. And by good, I mean it was far catchier. So, I forget how they were billing this in the lead-up. The whole selling point was that it was Bayley's proving ground match, because Charlotte was underselling Bayley from the minute she earned the title shot. Told her to stick to hugs because she wasn't ready for this level of competition. But then Bayley put on her game face and promised she would give Charlotte the fight of her life. So with that little story arc, I mean, it definitely made you want to root for Bayley that much more. Now that she's decided to put her big girl boots on. As corny as that might seem. And I'll be fair. This was a pretty good match overall. I don't think it earned any kind of Match of the Year award to my recollection. But as far as getting over the story of Charlotte being the bully heel and Bayley being the sympathetic underdog that you wanted to see stand up to the heel and prove that she belongs among the top competition, I think it did its job. I mean, Charlotte controlled a lot of the offense here, which probably wasn't the best idea in hindsight. I mean, she didn't really visibly fuck anything up until the last couple minutes. One of which was a spot where she completely blew a comeback cutoff when Bayley tried to kick her in the corner. Charlotte just flat out missed catching Bayley's boot. The other spot was where she tried to hit her moonsault press out of the corner, but landed on her feet. Therefore, she completely missed Bayley entirely. But aside from that, it wasn't bad. Again, Bayley spent most of the match selling, but the idea here was that she was still a level below Charlotte as an in-ring competitor, so it was at least a believable part to the story. She did hit a nice little Hurricane Run out of the corner for a big near fall. But again, the deal at the end was Charlotte whipping the back of Bayley's head into the bottom turnbuckle pad. And Bayley had already been selling the neck prior, so kind of just added insult to the injury. And then Charlotte did her botch moonsault out of the corner. Bayley kicked out at 2. And like 30 seconds after that, she just hit natural selection on Bayley and pinned her. I really wasn't a big fan of the finish because it came out of nowhere. But hey, for a Charlotte Flair match, I thought it was pretty good. I know it's going to rub people the wrong way, especially the people that actually think Charlotte's a good worker, the ones that easily get swept up in the bullshit WWE propaganda but don't actually pay attention to her sloppy ring work. Trust me, I've been watching it for well over 10 years, people. I know. This one just happened to have significantly less botches than normal. But Charlotte retains, which is fine. You know, they obviously want to spend more time building up Bayley before they outright put the belt on her. And they are still toying around with the Sasha Banks stuff. So this is kind of a buffer feud to eventually get to Charlotte and Sasha later on. And speaking of Little Miss Princess, they did the brief post-match where Sasha tried to come out and rub it in Bayley's face. So she started throwing forearms down on her. But then Charlotte came back down and pulled her off. So again, they're obviously leading to whatever they're about to do with Charlotte and Sasha on television. They didn't go as far as to have Charlotte shake Bayley's hand or anything, but there was that little nod of endorsement. So I guess you could call her a tweener, as the cool kids say. You got to speak the internet language. Elsewise, you're not part of the clan. But with that, we arrive at the main event. It's a fatal 4-way for the NXT Championship. One of my least favorite stipulations in all of wrestling. The multi-man clusterfuck where, you can't really structure anything because it's just nonstop spots the entire time. Broken up by sporadic near falls and stacked up stupid plex spots. But I will give them credit here. At least they bothered to build this up on TV and give it some actual story context. You know, Tyler Breeze, Sami Zayn, Tyson Kidd, Adrian Neville, they've all interacted in some way, shape, or form on TV. They have been the top guys on the brand for the entirety of 2014. They've all been associated with the title picture. I actually forgot about this too. I like the little feature they gave for these guys in the previous episode of Raw. And that was a clever way to generate last-minute intrigue for the Takeover special. You book them all in a tag match and stick them on a bigger platform on the flagship program. I'm sure it got him an extra boost in viewership on the network for it. So, again, you have to overlook a lot of the typical multi-man tropes that often get swept up into these types of matches. I've never been a big fan of the two guys doing stuff in the ring while the other two are out on the floor, patiently waiting to get involved or break up a pinfall attempt. It was less egregious here than I've seen in more modern 3-ways and 4-ways. And they were definitely working stories throughout the match. Breeze and Kidd were a very cohesive unit in the double teaming on Zayn and Neville. That was until the moment came where they had to turn on each other. They started causing dissension. The fans heckling Tyson with the natty chants. That was probably the best part of the whole match. Like, he's in there on offense, and every time he would hit a move or do something impressive, the fans would all go, "Natty's better." It's kind of a rare time when the smart fans are actually amusing to listen to. And there was at least a methodology for two guys being in the ring while trying to also isolate the other two guys on the floor. Tyson would kind of go back and forth between working over Zayn in the ring, Then he would keep cutting off Neville when he would try to climb back in. Tyler Breeze, I think, was mostly just taking a nap during that whole period. There was a pretty cool flashy moment during the babyface comeback sequence. Zayn is trying to set up for a big dive onto the heels, but Neville basically cuts off Zayn by doing a springboard leap off the ropes. Then he backflips out and lands on the heels instead. Kind of made it look like he was teasing that he was going to go after Zayn, but then he just took out the other heels. It looked neat. And that set up Neville and Zayn's altercation, which I had spent pretty much the whole match teasing. And it was a pretty short-lived face-off. They also fucked up a bunch of their spots. I don't know what happened there. Like right at the moment the fans were chanting, "This is wrestling," Neville tries for a handspring kick out of the corner, which I think Zayn was supposed to catch him on. But then Zayn dropped him. And the fans all went, ugh. And I know I just joked about the stacked up stupid plex bump. But you had to figure they were going to do it. It's a caveat for every multi-person match ever booked past the year 2000. It has to be done. You know, that's the point where the match is basically turned into a series of video game moves. And everybody's life bar was on full for the remainder of the match. Selling? What's that? Never heard of it. But they did milk the drama of all the near falls, all of which successfully got more dramatic as they went, so there was at least an escalation to it. I mean, by the end of the match, God, the people were practically ejaculating in their pants. They were so excited. But the big angle, actually probably my favorite moment of the entire event. So Neville gets taken out on a suicide dive from Sammy, and they're basically having Sammy run wild on everybody, to the point where the crowd's thinking, holy shit, this guy's actually going to win. So he hits Tyson in the corner with a pump kick. Or I'm sorry, not the pump kick, the haluva kick. And the ref's going down to count 3. And right as he's coming down to count the third fall, Neville yanks him out to the floor and stops it, which led to the big face-off where Neville and Zayn are kind of glaring through each other. They pretty much established Neville's heel turn right there, because he screwed over Sammy's one chance of becoming champion. It was funny, though, because right before Sammy realized what actually happened, that Neville was responsible for pulling out the official, you can audibly hear Sammy yell at the referee, and I don't think this was intentional on his part. It just came off so hokey with the way he delivered it. He goes, "Hey, what are you doing out there?" Like the ref just decided on a whim, you know, kind of like hanging out on the floor, so I'm going to chill out here for a while. What are you doing out there? Sami Zayn, 2014. Quote of the year. Think the referee was conspiring to fuck him over. Because everybody else has, apparently. God, just wait until Kevin Steen shows up. That's when it really goes to shit for Sammy's career. So Neville lays out Zayn with a super kick. Then he takes that window of opportunity to hit Kid with a red arrow out of the corner while he's still out. So Neville takes advantage of the situation and steals the pin. Every multi-man finish of the modern era. But again, they set up some story context for the following TV tapings. I wouldn't really call it a full-fledged heel turn in the traditional sense. But Adrian's got a lot of unanswered questions right now. You know, it's one thing to pull Zayn out to break up a pin attempt, but the referee, it's a pretty big heel move, brother. So was it desperation or Neville truly going into business for himself? I guess we'll have to wait and see what he says. But that was NXT Takeover Fatal 4-Way. I mean, the last two matches were definitely the highlights. Opener, I guess, was okay too, although unspectacular. I guess if you were watching at the time, there was some initial buzz over the Kenta signing, kind of waiting to see what they would do with him and how he would fit with the WWE system. I mean, I was never optimistic just because I never found him all that interesting as a personality. But you had that as well. The middle portion of the show, by and large, was a pretty big chore to get through. You know, the two squashes with Baron Corbin and Bull Dempsey served their purpose, but I mean, do they really need to be on the TakeOver special? And my God, that hair stipulation thing with Enzo Cass and the Legionnaires, that stuff was atrocious. I mean, that's the kind of bad sports entertainment garbage that I'm so glad we don't get on a consistent basis anymore. Between all the horrible acting and the subpar payoff, that's the kind of shit that belongs on underneath segments in the middle of Raw or SmackDown. Not premium live specials or takeover events. But maybe that's just the crusty part in me talking, who knows? We all know I hate fun, because fun is dumb. Now, I think I heard somewhere, wrestling shouldn't be fun, damn it. It should be serious and manly. Or maybe I'm watching too much territorial footage. And or listening to Ole Anderson. But that's going to wrap up this show here, and we're going to get this editing underway as quickly as possible. So thank you to everybody that came back to check out the 5 Starr Wrestling Report, and catch you guys soon as we come back for the Friday show and resume a normal scheduled programming next Monday. So take care. Peace out.